The barn smelled of old hay, sweat, and silence. Late August 1879, in the dry wind of Wyoming territory, Wade Callahan leaned against a worn fence post, his arms crossed over his chest. The sky above the Callahan ranch stretched wide and empty, the color of pale fire. He had owned the land for more than 10 years, waking up before the sun, feeding horses, fixing fences, and speaking to almost no one. His life was quiet. It was steady. But it was also lonely. That morning, just after sunrise, she walked up the dirt road like a ghost from nowhere. Thin arms, sunburned skin, tangled hair falling from a frayed bonnet. Her dress was patched in 3 places, and her shoes were almost falling apart. But her eyes, they were sharp, dark, and didn't look away when she spoke. "I can clean your barn," she said simply. In exchange for some food, and maybe a coin or two. Wade studied her. She looked tired but proud. Not the kind of tired that comes from a bad night's sleep, but the kind that comes from carrying too much for too long. He nodded once. "All right, barn's around back. There's water in the pump. You can eat after." She didn't smile. She didn't thank him. She just turned and walked toward the barn. Wade watched her go. Something in his chest moved just a little. All that day she worked without stopping. She shoveled the stalls, hauled out the spoiled straw, and scrubbed the walls. At one point, Wade found her brushing dried blood from a mare's flank with such care, such stillness that he had to stop and just watch. She didn't notice him standing there. She never once asked about her pay, never asked for a break. When the sun began to sink low behind the mountains, painting long shadows across the stables, she wiped her hands on her dress and walked off the ranch. Same as she came, quiet alone. Wade stood at the edge of the barn chewing on a piece of straw. She had come out of nowhere. She had said almost nothing. And she had left just as quietly. It was strange. The next morning, she returned before the light did. Same tired eyes, same slow steps, same silence. Day after day, she came. Every time, she worked until dusk and disappeared down the hill without a word. Wade started to wonder about her. Where did she go when she left? What did she eat? Where did she sleep? She didn't look like someone with a home. She didn't ride a horse. She didn't even carry a sack or bag. Just herself. Just those hands. Always busy. Always working. On the 5th day, Wade made a decision. Curiosity had been growing in him like a weed. That evening, when she walked away down the trail, he waited until she was out of sight, then he followed. He kept a distance, careful not to step on dry leaves or make the branches snap. She moved fast for someone so small, weaving through the trees like she knew them by heart. The sun was sinking fast. Orange light spilled through the pines. Wade followed her across a rocky creek bed, up a narrow deer trail, and finally through a wide clearing where the trees opened like a secret. There it was. A shelter half tarp. Half rotted, wood barely standing. Smoke rose from a crooked stovepipe. A soft lantern glow came from inside. Wade paused behind a fallen log, ready to leave. He had learned enough, then he heard it. Laughter. Children's laughter. Not fear, not crying. The soft giggle of small kids at play. His heart jumped, moved closer, peering through a gap in the boards. 4 small children sat around. A low fire. 2 boys, 2 girls. Thin as willow branches, but alive with light. One little girl, no more than 5, chased a moth near the lantern. Evelyn, yes, that must be her name, scooped her up and kissed the top of her head. Her face, once so hard and still in the barn, was now soft, loving, full of something that took Wade's breath away. She wasn't just working to survive. She was protecting them. Wade crouched there, unable to move. He had come looking for answers. What he found was something deeper. A woman with nothing but everything. A woman with 4 little souls depending on her in the cold Wyoming wilderness. And in that moment, as the trees rustled above him and the last of the day's light slipped behind the peaks, Wade knew one thing. This was not just about a barn anymore. This was about something much more, something that had found him quietly, the way she had without warning, but strong enough to change everything. Wade Callahan couldn't stop thinking about what he saw that night in the woods. The image stayed with him like a shadow that followed him through every part of the ranch. Evelyn, the quiet barn cleaner, was not just a drifter looking for work. She was a mother, holding together a broken shelter and 4 children with nothing but her bare hands and quiet strength. Never spoke about them. She never asked for help. But now Wade understood why she worked so hard and why she never looked anyone in the eye. The next morning, Wade left the house before sunrise. He packed a sack with flour, a small slab of salted pork, and a few apples. He didn't leave a note at first, just hung the bag on a nail by the old woodshed at the edge of the trail. Then, after a moment, he pulled out a piece of paper from his coat. His hands were rough and unsure as he wrote just 4 words. For the children, no charge. He didn't stay to watch. He returned to his chores, trying not to hope for anything in return. When Evelyn came to work that morning, she was the same as always silent, focused. She didn't mention the sack. She didn't ask about it. But after she left that evening, Wade found something waiting on the workbench in the tack room. A silver coin, and a note folded neatly. Please do not give again. I work to live. I do not beg. The writing was small, steady, and full of pride. Wade read it twice, then folded it back up and placed it in the drawer beneath his tools. He didn't try to leave food again, but 2 days later he left something else. A towel, clean, folded, tied with a bit of twine. She took it. That was all he needed to know. Then came the boy. It was a cool morning with the air sharp and still. Wade was fixing the hinges on the back gate when he heard a soft knock on the front door of the cabin. It was strange. No one ever came to call. He stepped around the house and saw a boy standing there about 10 or 11 years old, freckled face, straw-cold hair falling into his eyes, holding a small basket wrapped in cloth. You the one who gave my mama? The towel, the boy asked. Wade nodded. I suppose I am. The boy hesitated, then held out the basket like it was something sacred. She said I should bring these, said it's not right to take and not give. Inside the basket were 6 eggs, still warm, carefully wrapped in scraps of cloth and straw, not store-bought, not stolen. These were gifts from their own chickens Wade never saw. But now imagine clucking quietly in the brush beside that broken-down shelter. A lump rose in Wade's throat. You got a name, son? James? Well, James, Wade said. Kneeling slightly, you tell your mama, I said thank you, that I didn't give her anything because I wanted something back. I gave it because I wanted to. James studied him, like he was trying to decide if Wade was telling the truth. Then he nodded, quiet and serious, and turned to go. That night, Wade didn't light the fire right away. He just sat in the quiet of the cabin, staring at the basket. It was small, but it meant something. The eggs weren't just food, they were a message. A thank you that Evelyn didn't speak out loud, but still found a way to send. The next morning, tied to the fence post beside the barn, was a strip of old muslin cloth. On it, stitched carefully by hand, were 4 names. James, Clara, Lily, Sam, Wade. Didn't untie it, just stood there for a long time, hand resting on the post, letting the morning breeze carry the names like a whisper. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a man living alone on a forgotten ranch. He felt like someone who mattered to someone else. After that, Evelyn still never said much, but her silence no longer felt like distance. Some days she left behind small jars of wild berries. Once, it was a child's drawing made with charcoal, on scrap paper stick figures under a crooked tree. Another time, it was a half-knitted sock, still on the needle, left neatly on the bench. Simple things, quiet things, but they carried weight in Wade's heart. He began to repair things around the barn without telling her. New hinges, tighter boards, a fresh hook near the stall door just for her coat. She never said a word, but Wade noticed how. Her fingers lingered on the smooth new wood. How she paused when she saw the small changes. She noticed. And that was enough. Little by little, something was growing. Something quiet and strong, like roots under the soil. And Wade Callahan, who had lived 10 winters alone, began to rise each morning not for the chores, but for the sound of soft footsteps, and the thought of a woman and her 4 children hidden in the woods, surviving on nothing but grit, pride, and a mother's love. The clouds were thick over the mountains, heavy and dark like iron. The air had changed. Wade Callahan could feel it in his bones. Something was coming, a storm, yes, but something else too. Something deeper. For days he had been working quietly, not just on the barn, but for her, for Evelyn. He never told her, never asked her permission. But every board he replaced, every nail he hammered, every broken plank he fixed, it was for her. For them, for the 4 children she carried on her back without complaint. Evelyn never said thank you, not once. But Wade didn't need words. He saw it in the way her fingers traced the new wood by the stall. He saw it in the way she stood for a second longer, near the warm spot where he'd fixed a crack in the barn wall. One morning, he left a little extra pay on the bench. Just a few more coins, enough to buy warm socks or medicine. The next day they were still there, untouched. A note lay beside them, folded tight. "You've done enough. Don't carry what's not yours." He read it 3 times, then folded it slowly and placed it with the others, stacked neatly in the drawer of his desk, a growing pile of her handwritten refusals. A quiet collection of pride and strength. He never tried giving money again, but then the storm came. It didn't start with rain. It started with wind. The kind of wind that snaps tree branches and pulls smoke sideways from chimneys. By my afternoon, the sky had turned the color of ash. Then came the sound hail, sharp, angry, beating down like fists from the sky. Wade stood on the porch of the barn, rope coiled in one hand, watching the trail that led into the woods. He had a feeling in his gut, a twisting, a warning. Within minutes, his horse was saddled. His coat was thick and soaked within. Seconds, he leaned forward as the wind pushed against him. Mud sucked at the horse's hooves. Branches snapped and fell across the trail. But Wade didn't stop. When he reached the clearing, his heart sank. The shelter was breaking. The tarp had torn in 2 places. One whole side caved in. The canvas flapped wildly, and the wind howled through the gaps. The little stove was cold. No smoke, no light. Wade jumped off his horse and ran to the door. It barely held on its hinges. Inside, it was dark and cold and quiet. Then he saw them. The children were curled together under old blankets, eyes wide but silent. The smallest girl whimpered softly, her thumb in her mouth. And Evelyn was slumped against the back wall, blood streaking down her temple. A beam from the ceiling had fallen, missing her by inches. Her arms were still stretched wide, as if she had tried to shield them all with nothing but her body. "Evelyn," Wade said, stepping forward, his voice shaking. Her eyes opened. Slowly. She blinked, dazed. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Wade didn't wait. He moved fast, gathering the smallest child in one arm, then calling the 2 oldest to follow.
Ow.
James grabbed his sister's hand and pulled her up. They moved like they had done it before, quiet, obedient, strong. He turned back to Evelyn. She was trying to stand, her hands pressing against the wall. She was bleeding, her dress was soaked. But she looked at the children, and somehow she stood. Wade didn't speak. He just reached out and helped her walk. They made it back through the storm, slowly, carefully, with Evelyn holding Sam's hand and Wade carrying the youngest girl against his chest. The wind whipped around them, but he kept one arm tight around her, keeping her warm. When they reached the ranch, Wade didn't ask. He opened the front door wide. The fire in the cabin was glowing bright and warm. He had made sure of that. The children stepped inside one by one. Their eyes scanned the room, unsure. The baby girl clung to Wade's shoulder. Her cheeks were red from the cold, her lips trembling. Wade knelt down, pulled a warm tin cup of milk from the stove and offered it to her. She reached for it with both hands, drinking without a word. Behind her, Evelyn stood still, wet, pale, watching. Their eyes met. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her face said it all. "Thank you, I'm sorry. I didn't want this, but I had no other way." And Wade, who had lived 100 quiet nights in that cabin with no voices but his own, realized something deep inside his heart. This wasn't a rescue. This wasn't charity. This was something like a beginning. Something like family. The morning light crept into the cabin slowly, pale and cold, touching every corner like a quiet visitor. It was still early, and the world outside was covered in frost. Inside the ranch house, the fire had burned low, but still gave off warmth. The children were all asleep, curled together beneath thick quilts on the old rug. They looked peaceful now, safe. Evelyn sat up from where she had been resting beside them. Her head throbbed, her hands were stiff, but the pain didn't matter. What mattered were the 4 tiny bodies breathing soft and steady beside her. She reached out and gently touched Lily's hair, brushing it behind her ear. Her eyes stung, not from the cold, but from the fear she had carried for too long. She stood up quietly and moved to the wooden crate in the corner of the room, her trunk. It held everything she owned, scraps of cloth, a few coins, the worn towel Wade had given her weeks ago, and a bundle of folded notes, her handwriting filled. Each one updates she had written for herself, thoughts she never dared speak. She tucked them away with care, tying the bundle tightly with a piece of string. She didn't want to stay. But because staying meant letting someone else carry her burden, and she had never done that before. Not once. Not since her husband passed. Not since the winter that nearly took her baby. Not since she started walking these wild trails with 4 little souls behind her. She couldn't be someone else's problem. She looked at the children again, tears gathering in her eyes. They deserved more than this. She turned toward the back door. Her fingers wrapped around the latch. The sky outside was still dark. She left now. Before Wade woke, she could be gone by sunrise. She could find another way, another shelter, maybe work in a different town. She could thank him later, in a letter. But before she could open the door, she heard movement behind her. Wade stood in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of coffee. His eyes were gentle, his hair messy from sleep, his voice calm. "You don't have to go, Evelyn." She froze. "You're not a burden," he said, walking closer. "You didn't take anything from me. You gave me something I didn't know I needed." He handed her a mug. She took it slowly, her hands shaking. "I've lived alone for so long, I forgot what a home feels like," Wade said. "Then you and your children showed up. And suddenly the silence wasn't so heavy anymore." Looked down at the floor. "I didn't mean to stay this long." "I know," he said, "but maybe you were meant to." She looked up at him, and for the first time. She let herself really see him not. Just the rancher who gave her work, not the quiet man who left food and towels, but someone steady, someone kind. Someone willing to make room for 5 more lives in a world that didn't leave much space for the broken. The children began to stir behind them, tiny voices rising with the warmth of the morning. Clara stretched her arms and yawned. James sat up, blinking at the light. Lily still slept with a small smile on her lips. Sam rubbed his eyes, reaching out to his mother. Evelyn turned toward them, her heart full. Wade stepped back, giving her room. Later that day, something new happened. For the first time since she had arrived, Evelyn stayed past dark. She helped cook dinner. She and Wade sat at the same table. The children played in the corner with old wooden toys Wade hadn't touched. In years, the room was full of sound, not noise, not chaos, but life. Soft laughter, gentle footsteps, spoons clinking against bowls. It felt like the house had been waiting for this all along. Wade didn't say much that night. He didn't need to. He just kept looking at the 5 of them and smiling quietly to himself. Something inside him had changed, and he didn't want to go back to how things were before. The next morning, tied to the barn post, was another strip of muslin cloth. This one had something new stitched into it in the same careful small letters. "Thank you for not walking away." Wade touched the cloth gently, eyes wet with something he didn't try to hide. He whispered, "You're welcome." From that day on, Evelyn and the children didn't walk back into the woods. No, they stayed. Not as guests, not as strangers, but as part of something new, something real. And Wade Callahan, once a lonely rancher with only the wind for company, now had 5 reasons to rise before the sun. He had a new kind of purpose, one stitched with kindness, silence, pride, and love. The barn still smelled of hay. The wind still howled through the mountains. But inside the old ranch house, the fire burned brighter. And in the middle of Wyoming's wild land, a man who had once built a life of quiet now shared it with the woman who asked for nothing and gave him everything.